Hi, this is Clodagh from Yarn Not Alone in Muscat, and I want to thank you for coming along to learn how to make our NICU baby beanie. Today we'll be using 2 balls of Alize Baby Best, 24 peg loom. I have a row counter, a peg, my darning needle, a yarn guide, very optional, my pick, scissors, measuring tape, and this is the end product that we're looking for. To get started, I'm going to take my 2 yarns, just made a little knot in that, so I'm going to trim that end. I like to use a yarn guide when I'm using the E-wrap, which is what we use for these beanies. So I'm going to place my yarn in the looper. Oops, I did that back to front. What was I thinking? There we go. Okay. Now to get started, I'm going to do a slip knot. People do slip knots all different ways. Take my yarn up through the hole. And I'm going to pop that on the anchor peg. Not too tight, leave it a little bit loose. To start our beanie, we're going to do an E-wrap. An E-wrap comes from the outside to the inside of the loom. So I'm coming from the outside around my first peg, and I'm coming back around my second peg, around my third peg. And so what you can see is each time I'm going around the inside to the outside. You'll notice, oh, I missed a peg there. That was good. You'll notice that on the outside of the loom, there are the loops, and on the inside of the loom there's a bar. If you see this bar on the other side, you'll know you've made a mistake and go back. Okay, let's keep going around until I get back to where I started. So I'm going to continue now to the second row. The second row is also an E-wrap. Give yourself enough yarn so that you're not pulling on the tension, and continue all the way around back to the beginning. When I get back to the beginning, just to secure that down, I'm going to wrap it around my anchor peg. I'm just going to pop a little peg on there for now. So now we have all the way around two loops. We're going to take our bottom loop up and over the top loop. So I'm going to grab that bottom loop and I'm going to take it up and over the top loop. This is what we call knitting off a row, and I'm going to continue to do this all the way around back to where I started. The pegs have a groove in them which allows you to dig your hook in to pick up the yarn. And only on this very first row, because it's what we call our foundation row, do we wrap around twice. From here on in, we'll be wrapping once. So that now, on my counter, is row 1. I'm going to continue now around I've come back around, I'm going to secure my yarn, and once again I'm going to come in and knit each row off. Continue around doing this. Every time you get to the end, mark it on your stitch counter and continue until you get to row 5. Then I'll come back and see you. So I've just finished my 5th row, and what we need to do is remove the slip knot yarn, our starter yarn, from the anchor peg. If we don't remove it, what it's going to do is it's going to start to pull on our work and the tension will go off. So all you do is simply loosen it around, and then using your fingers, just pull that yarn through and let it drop down into the middle. We're going to fasten that one off later. Now, you don't have to use a yarn guide, which in effect is actually a straw. You can, of course, use your fingers to wrap in exactly the same way. In fact, the tension will be a little tighter if you use your fingers, but we allow for that variance in our sizing for yarn not alone. The beanie I'm making today is a medium-sized NICU beanie, and that pattern requires us to do 10 rows in the brim. So this is currently my 6th row, and I will meet you back here when you have finished your 10th row. I've finished my first 10 rows, and now this is what will make the brim on our hat. This is 10 rows turned up and stitched together. If you lost count, what you can do is have a look at your yarn and just separate it so that it makes rails, and you can count that along. Now remember, our first 2 cast on rows were counted as 1 row. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So to take up our rows, we want to find our last loop, and I'm going to take those last loops and put it over the top. I like to work from the inside out, but everyone does this differently. From here, I'm going to take the next loop and the next loop, and I'm going to continue this around. And if you can also use your fingers if you prefer. And by just stretching it out a little, it allows me to see where the next loop is. That's my last one. So now you can see that I have 2 loops going across, and we're going to treat this the same way we would if we had cast on a row. We're going to take the bottom loop over the top. So I'm going to take the bottom over the top, the bottom loop over the top. You continue that around until you get back to the start. So you can see now that the brim has been closed all the way around. This is my starting yarn, which I'm going to just leave hang in the middle, because when I'm finished the beanie, I will knot that off and weave in the ends. So for now, we're going to continue. This medium size, oh, I just noticed I hadn't knit off that last one. So let me do that. There we go. This medium size asks for us to do 10 in the brim and 15 in the hat. So I'm going to continue now with my E-wrap, and I will do again 1 row, knit it off, 1 row, knit it off, 1 row, knit it off, and I'm going to do that for 15 rows. So if you'd like to pause the video here, you can go ahead and do your 15 rows, and we'll see you back at the beginning. One thing to note after you've done the brim and you're starting on your 15 rows is when we seal the brim together, that row where we knit the bottom and the top end together, that counts as 0. And now I'm resetting my counter to 0, and I start from row 1 to 15. Here I am coming around to the end of row 15. And that is my 15 rows complete. It's time for us now to bind off or cast off. I'm going to take the yarn and wrap it around the loom just over one time, almost 1.5. Cut that. I have my darning needle. I'm going to take my 2 threads through my darning needle, and starting at my first peg here, I'm going to take my darning needle up through the loop, and I'm going to continue all the way around, catching both of those loops with my darning needle. So I'll continue around and I'll see you back here. As you're going around this way, and I said continue around to the end, there's 2 ways you can do this. You can continue around to the end and then take it off the loom, or to give yourself a little bit of slack, start on the first stitch that you've already taken the darning needle through and just lift it off the loom. So these of course are the ones that we have already taken our darning needle through, and as you can see I can pull a little bit more slack there if I need it. But that's a personal choice, and if you have measured enough yarn out, you will be able to go all the way around and then take them off in one go. I'm up to my last one here. I'm going to take this off the loom. So here's my yarn with my darning needle and my hat. Now, I like to do it this way. I pop the needle in and I bring it down. Then I'm going to pull on that and close it up. Now, because we're working with 2 pieces of yarn that are side by side, what we need to do is take one of these pieces. So I'm just going to rethread one of these pieces back through my darning needle. Okay. And I'm just going to take it through 2 of the loops there. And what I've done by doing that is I've created something for these 2 pieces to go across so that we can actually tie this now. I've given it a good tight pull, and I'm now going to do a double knot on top. Now we have way too much yarn here, so I'm going to trim that off. I'm going to rethread my darning needle, and I've already done a knot to secure it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my darning needle through the top of the loops that we just created to pull it in. So I'm more or less hiding these threads in between the top layer and the bottom layer. When I get round to the other side, to make sure this is really secure and when it's in the washing machine the threads won't come out, I miss a little bit and then I come back again the opposite way. And by doing it this way, I'm really making sure that my threads are nicely secured and sealed in. That's nice and safe now. I can give that a chop and we can see that that has sealed it up nicely. So I'm going to come down here to the bottom where I had my slip knot, and again these two yarns were working together, so let's separate them and we'll take one through our darning needle, and I'm just going to take that under a stitch to separate the two yarns that were working together, and I'm going to do a double knot, or I think some people call them surgical knots, reef knots, right over left, left over right. Okay, what you want to make sure is that you have a really tight knot that's not going to come undone. This is a little bit long, so I'm going to trim those ends. I'm going to thread my needle, and I'm going to take this in the brim. It's folded over, so I'm going to take it through the brim and hide those threads in the brim and trim off any excess. And in fact, if you want to be extra careful, after you've gone down one way, just come over one loop and go up the other way. That's been overly cautious, but it means that for sure everything there is nicely concealed. And there we have finished our Yarn Not Alone NICU beanie. I'm out of camera there, sorry. We have different sizes, so refer to our pages for what sizes we are doing and for all of our updates. Thank you very much, and thanks for participating in our Yarn Not Alone project.